West, it's a case of blustery showers moving through with some sunny spells too, and showers across Northern Ireland. Towards northern England and into Wales, some dry weather to start the day, but cloudier conditions further the south and east. There you go, with some outbreaks of rain on a Monday morning. So as we go through Monday and into the afternoon, showers continuing to push through swiftly across Scotland and Northern Ireland. Drier conditions towards the south of that, with some hazy sunshine across parts of Wales, southwest England, with the cloud really restricted towards the far southeast, where we could see some outbreaks of rain too. Temperatures just a touch down, but still around 16 degrees as the high. As we go through Tuesday morning, there will be some bright skies out there with lighter winds, but also some showers around, and that continues into the afternoon. It's a case of sunny spells and scattered showers as well. Then as we look into Wednesday, a little bit drier before gradually turning a bit more unsettled Thursday and into Friday. Bye-bye.
Expect a warm front, moving from the kitchen right through to the rest of the house. Boxed Boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Mark Dolan tonight is your weekend dose of news, debate and entertainment.
This sounds like a wild conspiracy theory.
Don't miss My Big Opinion, Mark Meets, and My Take at 10.
Democracy is a funny old thing.
And we don't do boring, not on my watch. I just won't have it.
Let's go and get another glass of that bubbly. You've earned it.
That's Mark Dolan tonight, Saturday and Sunday, 9 to 11, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more. Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Good evening. It's 9 o'clock on television, on radio and online. In the United Kingdom and across the world, this is Mark Dolan Tonight. In My Big Opinion, Labour's Halloween budget will be the scariest in years. Be afraid, folks, be very afraid. I'll be giving you all the gory details in just a moment. In the big story, former Brexit Secretary David Davis has this to say about jailed serial killer nurse Lucy Letby.
I think most likely, you can't be certain, but most likely, like 90-odd%, not guilty.
Is Lucy Letby the victim of a huge miscarriage of justice? I'll be asking one of the country's top lawyers in just a moment. With right-wingers in this country divided over his bid for the White House, is it wrong for British Conservatives to support Donald Trump? And in my take at 10, I'll be giving my verdict on which of the last two candidates should next lead the Conservatives. Will I go for Jenrick or will I go for Badenoch? I shall reveal all at 10. Tonight's top pundits fired up and ready to go. We have journalist Linda Jubilee, Conservative peer and former Boris Johnson advisor Lord Coolvere Ranger, and former top Labour minister Bill Rammell. 2 hours of big opinion, big debate and big entertainment. I'll be making my pick for the Tory leadership in a special Take at 10 in an hour's time. But first up, folks, let me tell you, the Halloween budget will be the stuff of nightmares. I shall explain all straight after the headlines with Katie Bowen.
Mark, thank you, and a very good evening to you. It's just gone 9 o'clock. These are the latest headlines from the GB newsroom. NHS England has encouraged ambulance services to leave patients in hospital corridors after 45 minutes in a bid to respond faster to 999 calls. The reports from the Sunday Times come as Health Secretary has pledged to build an NHS fit for the future. Announcing a consultation into the health service today, Mr Streeting said, "If we want to save the things we love about the NHS, then we have to change it." Millions of people are set to receive health monitoring smartwatches as part of Labour's plan to save the NHS, while there have also been reports that weight loss injections could be used to reduce unemployment. Elsewhere, the Prime Minister says the whole country is behind Sir Chris Hoy following his terminal cancer diagnosis. Sir Keir Starmer posted on X, saying Chris is a British sporting legend. To face his diagnosis with such positivity is inspiring. The 48-year-old has 2 to 4 years left to live. Sir Chris told the Sunday Times he's known for a year that his cancer is terminal. While undergoing treatment in February, Sir Chris said he felt forced to reveal his cancer diagnosis publicly. He's the 3rd most decorated British Olympian of all time, with 6 career golds and 1 silver medal. Some news from the Middle East now. The United Nations peacekeeping force in Lebanon said in a statement tonight that an Israeli bulldozer has demolished an observation tower and the perimeter fence of a UN post in southern Lebanon. Israel has said that it has hit Hezbollah's intelligence headquarters in its latest strike on Lebanon's capital, Beirut, today, while Hamas-run authorities say at least 87 people were dead or missing following a strike on northern Gaza last night. Fans in the UK and around the world have held vigils this weekend in memory of Liam Payne, the One Direction star who died on Wednesday. A memorial event, which included a minute's silence, took place in London's Hyde Park earlier. It comes as Liam's father visited the hotel in Argentina yesterday, where his son died, while his bandmate Zayn Malik announced he'll reschedule his US tour after the heartbreaking death. Parts of the country are dealing with dangerous weather conditions this evening due to Storm Ashley's arrival. Parts of Western Scotland and Northern Ireland are under an amber weather warning for strong winds, with the Met Office warning of power cuts and damage to buildings. Danger to life is also reportedly likely from large waves hitting coastal roads. And finally, to the US, Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump has been on the campaign trail today, cooking fries at a McDonald's in Pennsylvania. If you're watching on television, you can see the former president working at the restaurant on your screens. While serving customers, he wished the Vice President, Kamala Harris, a happy birthday as she turned 60 today. Those are your latest GB News headlines. I'm Katie Bowen. Now it's time for Mark.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Katie. In my Take at 10, I'll be giving my verdict on which of the last 2 candidates should next lead the Conservatives. So, will it be Jenrick or Badenoch? I will reveal all in just an hour's time. Plus, is Lucy Letby the victim of a miscarriage of justice? And should the Conservatives ditch net zero to win the next election? Lots to get through. Anne Widdecombe, my Take at 10, my top pundits. But first, my big opinion. Good evening. Now, there's an old Irish joke. I think I'm allowed to do it as I am a Dolan. A man is lost and asks an Irishman called Paddy for directions. The Irishman replies, "Well, if I were you, I wouldn't start from here." And Paddy is right. After our wild 2.5-year experiment in communism, in which we shut down the country and the economy, in a failed bid to stop a nasty but mild for most respiratory virus, Britain is broke. Worth noting that Starmer and Reeves, in opposition, called for more of those ruinous COVID measures. So yes, this government has inherited a Tory mess, but in some ways they co-own this nightmare as well. And the one great truth about this country that Rachel Reeves is unlikely to acknowledge at the end of the month is that Britain lives beyond its means, with public spending now representing almost half of our national income, when it was 35% 2 decades ago. More money is going into public services with worse outcomes, whether it's policing, the NHS or education. So the right approach would be a drastic reduction in the size of the state, wage restraint and unprecedented spending cuts, perhaps upwards of £35 billion. Instead, the Chancellor is said to be considering extra taxes of £35 billion. Why? Well, because the cuts Britain needs are politically impossible for a party that has promised the public sector a huge cash bonanza, or to use that snake oil word that they love so much, investment. What we need is not just unprecedented cuts, but a vast reduction in taxes too, to boost national income, to pay for great public services and to reduce the debt, the interest of which alone is currently costing us £100 billion a year. Now, the Chancellor may fiddle the fiscal rules in order to borrow further billions. What's that going to do? Saddle future generations with an even bigger bill. And whilst they promised that taxes on working Brits would not go up, a predicted £12 billion hike in national insurance contributions from businesses is exactly that. The very impressive Tina McKenzie from the Federation of Small Businesses said hiking small firms' tax is a recipe for cuts to pay, hours and jobs. Meanwhile, the Institute for Fiscal Studies says raising employer national insurance contributions is effectively a tax on the earnings of working people. A feared £5 billion hike in fuel duty is another tax rise on working people. Ask anyone with a van or folk who have to drive to work or take their kids to school. And it will hurt small businesses in particular, who are already struggling. 600,000 firms are currently said to be on the verge of collapse. The Adam Smith Institute now fear that the tax rate on the non-DOMs, disgracefully introduced by the Tories, may cost the country £6.5 billion over the next decade in lost jobs, growth and investment, rather than raising anything. And a record 10,000 millionaires are expected to leave the country this year alone. How rich people with all their spending power leaving Britain helps the poor is anyone's guess. And so much for Rachel Reeves' imaginary £22 billion black hole, which is proving as elusive as the Loch Ness Monster. It was fishy from the start. First of all, we know that contested figure could be almost halved if she hadn't forked out £9 billion for inflation-busting pay rises for the likes of junior doctors and train drivers. And now there's talk of boosting spending by a further £40 billion altogether. Now, some of that will be for infrastructure, and that is a good thing. But billions will be there to fund Ed Miliband's wild net zero experiment, which involves betting the house on flaky renewables. Not to mention a cash splurge on an already failing and bloated public sector. Now, there have been times when we have needed a Labour government. But with the country crying out for low taxes, fiscal restraint and business-led growth, now is not one of them. I don't know about you, but I am dreading the October Halloween budget. It will be tricks and treats and an utter horror show. Your reaction, gbnews.com/your say. I'll get to your messages shortly, but first, tonight's top pundits, I'm delighted to have journalist and broadcaster Linda Jubilee, Conservative peer Lord Coolvere Ranger, and former top Labour Minister Bill Rammell. Bill, great to see you. Great to see all three of you, by the way. Bill, are you worried about this Halloween budget?
No, because I think there are going to be some sensible, needed decisions. I mean, firstly, this government has had an awful inheritance from the Tories. There is a 22 billion black hole. To take just one example, the costs of asylum hotels are about 50 times more than the Home Office budgeted for this year. Secondly...
How's Labour's effort to stop the boats going then?
We're making progress.
Are numbers down?
They're down on 2 years ago. The overall numbers are down, and we're hugely speeding up removals from this country, which is what is needed. But secondly, and I disagree with you, Mark, that the public sector is awash with money. Baked into the Tory spending plans were impossible spending projections, which would have led to huge cuts in local government, in social care, and so much more. We're having to tackle that. Unfunded promises like new hospitals and defence spending. Mm-hmm. Alongside that, people voted for change. They voted for more investment in public services. That's what Labour is having to grapple with. Now, we're not going to go back on the commitment not to raise personal taxes for working people. I think there will be moves to make the wealthier pay more, and I think there will be a sensible tweaking of the fiscal rules, which actually economists on both the right and the left are calling for, and that will help us to move forward and start rebuilding the country.
Cool. Vera, are you satisfied with that answer?
No, not really. We could put a pin in the inheritance of the economy for Labour, because the challenges were there, and what they inherited was an economy that was growing, and the promises that were being made were going to be delivered from growth. So the objective of any government is to engineer growth in its economy so that they can pay for the promises they're about to deliver. Now, the challenge for this Labour government, and Mark, you were saying there's times for a Labour government. I think there's times for a new Labour government, the one we had in '97, with a Chancellor who was extremely adaptable and capable of understanding how to manage the economy.
I don't think that was what the Tories said at the time.
Well, actually, yes, but the Tories weren't in any fit state at that point to deal with it.
Now.
But the point now is that we have to have a government that looks at how does it continue to be sensible with engineering growth and rejigging, as people have said, fiscal rules that I don't think are being welcomed by economists from either sides. Because if the OECD, if the OBR all look at this and say, right, we're going to look at investment, government spending as investment and take that off the balance sheet, the bond markets aren't going to react well to that. They're going to quickly see through it. And the cost of this government and this country's borrowing is going to go up. And our debt levels are going to go up. And the cost to us to pay for this debt is going to go up. So there is no magic bullet in that route.
Can the Chancellor justify any more borrowing or any more spending, Linda?
No, and I think that already the problems unusually have started weeks before this budget has been announced. And what that's done in the mismanagement of the communication of it is it has led to a terrible, terrible dive in public confidence before any announcement has even been made. What worries me about this budget, and I do worry about the absence of non-doms and the really wealthy bracket who can fund investment.
10,000 millionaires this year leaving the country. Yeah, how does that help poor people?
Well, it doesn't. But
it makes lefties feel good about themselves for some reason.
Maybe. But one of my bigger concerns is what we would call, and it's a bit of a cliche, the squeeze middle. Tina McKenzie quite rightly pointed out that actually, you know, I think to paraphrase Napoleon, we are a nation of shopkeepers. We are a nation of small businesses. We need to get on top of the tax provision for those businesses, because if we don't, and if we stop the aspirational part of society, which is the squeeze middle, then we are heading for trouble, because we will lose momentum, and once we lose momentum, we'll lose ambition. And that's a vicious circle.
You are a very clever man, OK, and you're a very decent man as well. I don't think you're buying into this latest Labour project. OK, I think you've got far too much common sense. I think you're like one of those Church of England vicars that doesn't actually believe in God, OK? And I think that you would back a new Labour approach to the economy, which is to cut taxes, to boost national income and reduce spending and stick to Tory spending plans. Don't you think that's the way forward?
Do you know, Mark, I'm New Labour to my core, but actually these are different times and different circumstances, and you need a new approach. You talk about cutting taxes. I think this budget will be laying the foundation so later in the Parliament we can start to cut personal taxes for working people, and I think that will be the right thing to do. The argument around poor communications is one that I would wholly accept. I think the communications in the first 3 months of this government have been poor. When you're in government, you need to be explaining day to day what you're doing, why you're doing it, and how you're doing it. And that's not been done effectively. With the change of personnel that we've seen recently, I think that will start to happen. And what we've got to make clear is the way through this budget, we're delivering for working people. I think there's a difference of opinion on this sofa. I actually think the vast majority of people do want more investment in public services, and that's in part why Labour was elected, and we've got to deliver on.
I think I agree with Bill that this budget will show a direction of travel for this government, but it will show the public that what a Labour government that they haven't had since the mid-70s does when it comes to the economy, and that's what people are going to understand from this budget.
OK, well, look, folks, do you feel lied to by this Labour government? We were told that taxes wouldn't go up, certainly on ordinary working people, but many would argue that national insurance contributions from businesses will ultimately cost jobs and pay rises. Let me know your thoughts. gbnews.com/your say. But it's time now for the Great British Giveaway. The clock is ticking on getting your entry in. Lines are closing on Friday. Make sure you don't miss out on your chance to win £36,000 in tax-free cash. Here's how you do it.
And good luck.
Next up in the big story, former Brexit Secretary David Davis has this to say about jailed serial killer nurse Lucy Letby.
I think most likely, you can't be certain, but most likely, like 90-odd%, not guilty.
So, is Lucy Letby the victim of a huge miscarriage of justice? I'll be asking one of the country's top lawyers next.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Good morning, Georgia. Your story is incredible. Just remind us of it. You quit running in, was it 2017? Because I mean, to be quite frank, your body was knackered, you had injuries, you thought you couldn't go on anymore. But then you started running again at Parkrun in 2022. And of course, this summer at the Olympics, you won bronze.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Yeah, it has been a bit of a journey. And yeah, there was a period of time where I stopped running completely. And then Parkrun was just something I got into with my friends, my family, just local community. And I started to see the improvements that led me to get back in contact with my old coach and just worked my way back up to elite level running and got a bronze medal this summer in Paris.
Did you ever think that would happen when you were beginning to take part in park runs again? Did you ever think you'd be winning bronze in the 1500 metres at the Olympics?
No, not at all. It would have been absolutely bonkers, I think, to think that at the time. It was just building my way up, but it was all about finding happiness in running again. And that's really what Parkrun does, I think, really well.
And can you just tell us in the audience what had happened to you in 2017?
So I had been like a good junior athlete. I had gone over to the US on a track scholarship at university, and I just experienced so many different injuries. So various stress fractures in my shins, and I just graduated and just thought there's no way I can run anymore. So took a big break. And then, yeah, over the past few years, I just got back into running slowly, built it up, and Parkrun is just something that is on every Saturday. So many parks across the UK, very accessible, free. So it was just a really good way to get back into a fun but semi-level of competitive running.
The People's Channel.
This is Britain's Newsroom, where your voice matters.
It's just astonishing. With expert analysis and honest opinion, we don't just keep you informed.
We bring you unique perspectives you won't see anywhere else.
Can't argue with any of that. When the news happens, it happens here.
On Britain's Newsroom, weekdays from 9:30 a.m.
Only on GB News.
If you want your news to be straight talking...
This is a nightmare for the Conservatives again.
Down to earth.
It's not just Nottingham where this is happening, is it?
And most importantly, honest.
Hard-working, middle-class taxpayers, they'll get their book thrown at them.
Then catch me, Martin Daubney, Monday to Friday, 3 till 6 p.m. on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Nana Akwe, for an informative, interactive news programme with a difference. It's fun.
No, he didn't say that, Dave.
I'm so surprised.
I think there's an element of truth to that.
Join me from 3 p.m. every weekend, only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
Welcome back. We'll look a big reaction to my big opinion. Bruce is not happy. gbnews.com/your say. Utter rubbish by confidence tricksters Labour. Glad I voted reform in Dorset. If they impact pensions or sacrifice contributions, that impacts workers. The main way those in the private sector save for a pension. David says, good evening, Mark. It's no good complaining about this government. Only 62% voted in the last election. We should be blaming the 38% who couldn't be bothered. Anne-Marie says, there is no magic bullet because that is not the correct saying. It is a silver bullet. Thank you for that. And John says the black hole was a black lie to justify punishing pensioners. I don't trust this so-called government to do anything right, says John. Keep those messages coming, but it's time now for this. Yes, it's time for the big story, and the former Brexit Secretary David Davis this morning told our political editor Christopher Hope that there are questions to be answered about the conviction of serial killer nurse Lucy Letby. Take a listen.
You're investigating the Lucy Letby trial.
Yeah.
What's the update on that? Was it a miscarriage of justice? Have you met with her yet?
No, I haven't met with her. I mean, I'm not worried about it. And people ask, would I meet with her? I said, yes, if she wants to, but I don't. I'm not going to make a judgment of her innocence or guilt by looking at her and saying, you know, are you guilty? I'm judging on the evidence. I spent 3 months going through the evidence.
And where are you now? Guilty or not guilty?
I think most likely, you can't be certain, but most likely, like 90-odd%, not guilty.
So is it time then to retry Lucy Letby?
Yeah, I don't want to declare her innocent. I want a retrial. Do it properly.
So is Lucy Letby the victim of an historic miscarriage of justice? Let's get the views of leading criminal barrister and television broadcaster Jerry Hayes. Jerry, good to see you again. What's your view of politicians like David Davis making an intervention of this nature?
Well, David's a very old friend and he's got a good heart, but I feel very queasy when politicians pontificate on things they don't know an awful lot about. I mean, think about the family of those people who lost the babies. Think of the whistleblower. Think of the jury. Now, we had a very, well, I say we, I wasn't there, but I get very, very uneasy when people who weren't at the trial, who haven't seen all the evidence, who haven't seen the judgments of the Court of Appeal, and it's been to the Court of Appeal, all this has been aired before. Maybe there may be something to it. But it's not for politicians to get involved. They must keep well away from this sort of thing. And I'm really distrustful of cuttings journalism. I mean, I suspect Mark and everyone in the studio, you know, we know about the Letby case, what we read in the newspapers, and they're not always incredibly accurate at all. You've really got to be there. Trust her defence team to do the right thing, and they're starting a campaign. They're going to the Criminal Review Commission, and we'll see what happens there. But it has been to the Court of Appeal.
How hard would it be for her defence team to make a retrial happen?
Well, they've tried the route of the Court of Appeal, and I've just been reading the judgments, and it is a very, very 58 pages of it, very detailed judgment indeed. It's difficult when you go to the commission, but their job is to look at it. And in fact, there's been a reform of the commission because perhaps in the past they haven't been as assiduous as they could have been. So it's possible. That is the last chance saloon. Don't get politicians involved in any of this. Don't get the press involved in any of this.
Is there even the suggestion from your cursory knowledge of this case that something may be amiss here, that the verdict could be unsafe?
Well, how do I know? Because I haven't looked at the evidence. I wasn't there. There are a few journalists who actually, in fact, I've spoken to various journalists who were there, and they thought, you know, this was a slam dunk conviction. But it's been through the Court of Appeal. I think it's been through the Court of Appeal twice. And now they can go to the Criminal Review Commission. Well, let's see what happens there.
Okay.
But I just It's wrong for people to make judgments. For a politician, a senior politician, a former member of the cabinet to say, oh, I'm 90% sure. Oh, come on. Let's keep off this sort of stuff.
Well, let's bring in broadcaster and journalist Linda Duberly, if we can, Jerry. Linda, do you think that this conviction of Lucy Letby could be unsafe?
Well, that is very difficult to say. I wasn't in court. I've covered hundreds of court cases, but I clearly wasn't in court for this court case. I did listen to the judge's summing up and his sentencing in its entirety. And I think one of the things that came out of that is it's incredibly difficult to build your rational view of this case because there's so much emotion in it. There's one thing I would say about Sir David's comment, in that he's said not guilty. What he actually means is not proven. Even if you believe that the case has to be retried, that you think there's something wrong with the statistics, you still wouldn't say at this stage not guilty. You would say that the statistical evidence hadn't proven her to be innocent and to be acquitted. Now, I think this is a very, very complicated case, and as I understand it, the case for a mistrial is based mainly on the statistical evidence, and there is something called, it's been reported on before, the prosecutor's fallacy, and that is that the statistical evidence was collected with a view to placing the blame on one person, whereas statistical evidence should be collected so that you are led by the evidence to find out the clear facts of the case. So that's one really big point, and that probably does, in my view, deserve to be looked at again. One of the other areas that does interest me is the back door to the unit, which didn't have the same electronic pass card as the front door did, and you couldn't tell who was going in and who was going out. And that is at the heart of the statistical evidence, which indicates that Lucy Letby was in the unit at the time of the deaths and was the only person consistently there throughout. But as for politicians not being involved in court cases, I'd like to remind Jerry, of course, that Lord Arbuthnot was a key figure in the Post Office story, and without his undoubted help, the Post Office case would never have come to court, I suspect.
Jerry, do you want to come back on that, Jerry?
Yeah, that's a very, very different matter altogether. I mean, James did a fantastic job because there were clear irregularities. Everyone could see their irregularities. Everyone could see, but no one was doing anything except for James. So that's a very different thing altogether. And Linda, with respect, I think you're going into that little rabbit hole that David Davis is saying. You're saying, well, we'll look at this, let's look at that. It has been looked at. It's been looked at by the Court of Appeal. And in the Court of Appeal, it's not retrying on the evidence, it's irregularities of law. And that's what the Court of Appeal has to decide.
Jerry, is it reckless what David Davis said this morning to Christopher Hope?
I wouldn't say reckless. I think it was unwise. I think it's insulting to the families.
Is it a conspiracy theory?
I haven't got a clue, but it has the whiff of the internet about it.
Briefly, Jerry, if she were to be retried and acquitted, in historic terms, how much of a miscarriage of justice would that be?
Well, it would be enormous, wouldn't it? Because she's got 15 full life sentences, and I don't think anyone's had that before. So it would be an amazing, an appalling miscarriage of justice. But let the professionals deal with it. Let the legal team deal with it. Let the commission deal with it. Please let's have politicians. My gosh, I'm sure Robert Jenrick has got a view on it, which I'm sure we're all eager to hear.
Indeed, I think he's going to unlock the cell. He's quite a dynamic chap. He's doing whatever makes a headline. Listen, briefly, Linda, closing thoughts on this. Do you think we'll see a retrial? Do you think we should?
I can't help feeling that it's unlikely. And I was very swayed by the testimonies of the senior consultants involved. These are intelligent, professional people. Whilst I agree that the unit was said to be, very chaotically run at some points, and there were several infections in place at the time, I find it hard to believe that Lucy Letby wasn't responsible.
Jerry, great to see you again. Let's have a cup of tea soon. The criminal barrister and television broadcaster, former MP as well, Jerry Hayes. Linda Jubilee returns in just a few minutes. She is part of my superstar panel. But next up, with right-wingers in this country divided over his bid for the White House, is it wrong for British Conservatives to support Donald Trump? We'll debate that next.
Good evening and welcome to a GB News weather update from the Met Office. A stormy day out there with Storm Ashley gradually clearing. Then it will be a case of blustery showers in the north, but drier towards the south. Looking at the bigger picture, this is this area of low pressure named Storm Ashley that will gradually be moving its way north and eastward, but a real squeeze in those isobars indicating some strong winds. There are Met Office wind warnings in force. We could see gusts 70 to possibly 80 miles per hour as we go through Sunday night and into Monday morning, followed by blustery showers across Scotland and Northern Ireland, drier towards the south with lows of 11 to 12 degrees. So as we start Monday morning, still some very strong winds, especially across northern parts of Scotland and then into Orkney and Shetland. Again, 60, possibly even 70 miles per hour here. Further towards the west, it's a case of blustery showers moving through with some sunny spells too, and showers across Northern Ireland. Towards northern England and into Wales, some dry weather to start the day, but cloudier conditions further the south and east that you go with some outbreaks of rain on a Monday morning. So as we go through Monday and into the afternoon, showers continuing to push through swiftly across Scotland and Northern Ireland. Drier conditions towards the south of that with some hazy sunshine across parts of Wales, southwest England, with the cloud really restricted towards the far southeast where we could see some outbreaks of rain too. Temperatures just a touch down, but still around 16 degrees as the high. As we go through Tuesday morning, there will be some bright skies out there with lighter winds, but also some showers around, and that continues into the afternoon. It's a case of sunny spells and scattered showers as well. Then as we look into Wednesday, a little bit drier before gradually turning a bit more unsettled Thursday and into Friday. Bye-bye.
I'm Christopher Hope. From pop stars to politicians, I'll interview anybody in a pub who's got a political opinion. Join me every Friday on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, YouTube or gbnews.com, or wherever you get your podcasts. This is GB News, the People's Channel.
In the GB Newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK, we're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News, the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
Nightmare commute? Kick it up a gear with GB News Radio. You can listen online and on DAB+ and on the GB News app. We're also on TuneIn and the Radio Player apps. From the school run to rush hour, get revved up with GB News Radio. We are the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Looking forward to my take at 10. I'll be declaring for either Badenoch or Jenrick. Who's it going to be that gets my vote? That's a Take at 10 special at the top of the hour. But first up, right-wingers in this country appear divided over Donald Trump's fitness for high office, with Conservative columnist at The Telegraph, Janet Daly, this week writing in the paper, Trump is an embarrassment to himself and to the right. This new era does not need more Trumps. It needs more Reagans and Mrs. Thatchers, clear in mind and morally disciplined. So should Conservatives think twice about backing Donald Trump in the race for the White House? Is he a proper Conservative? Let's get the views of the director of the Popular Conservatives, Mark Littlewood. Mark, what do you make of Janet Daly's article there and some figures on the right who aren't that keen on Donald Trump?
Yes, look, Mark, I guess it's okay to express a personal opinion about the way he presents himself. And I suppose if I was offered a choice between Donald Trump and Ronald Reagan, I'd plump for Ronald Reagan. But I'm not being offered that choice, or rather the American people aren't being offered that choice. They're being offered the choice between Trump and Harris. And the Republican Party of the USA is effectively the sister party of the British Conservatives. The default, I think, should be that Conservatives should be cheering on the Republican candidate. And an exception to that might be if the Democrat candidate was a very conservative sort of character, pro-market, pro-national security. But that's certainly not true of Kamala Harris. I mean, she is probably the most left-wing candidate to win the Democratic nomination, well, in donkey's years, I mean, in the modern era. So for all his faults, and I appreciate a good number of people don't find him particularly charming and worry about some of his behaviours, but I think the default should be that the Conservatives should back the Republican candidate, and this time round, that's Donald Trump.
Of course, Donald Trump is a convicted felon. He's an election denier. Many people consider that he was instrumental in that truly constitutionally disastrous moment, January the 6th, and the storming of the Capitol. Many people think that Donald Trump brings conservatives into disrepute and therefore they don't want to sign up for his project. Some would argue he's not even a true conservative. He's just a maverick populist.
Yeah, I think it's fair to say he's more of a populist than a traditional conservative. That's true. He's probably more like the American equivalent of Nigel Farage than the American equivalent of Rishi Sunak, I think it's probably fair to say. But I get a bit nervous, politicians on this side of the pond, delving too deeply into people's sort of personalities to sort of say, well, we're not going to declare for Donald Trump because of this particular lawsuit or because he said this particular thing. I think that politicians of both left and right here should have a broad view of the platform that the two candidates are running on and not make their judgment on whether Donald Trump said something untoward at a rally or Kamala Harris failed to impress in a Fox News interview. So although I've got qualms about Trump, and I'm not an American voter, and it's a decision for the American people, I do have in my baseball cap collection, a rather sad thing to have for a man in his 50s. I do have my Make America Great Again baseball cap. But Mark, you'll be interested to know I also have my Make the Tories Conservative Again baseball cap. And I think if the Conservatives were actually conservative again, it'd be pretty unambiguous that given this choice, Trump or Harris, that Conservatives should be hoping that Trump wins.
Well, it's interesting, briefly, if you can. Robert Jenrick, a man that you're backing for the Tory leadership, said that he wants Donald Trump to win, but Kemi Badenoch wouldn't be led on who her preferred candidate was of Harris or Trump. Notable difference there in their response to what's happening in the States.
Yeah, and it won't surprise you to know, Mark, I'm with Robert Jenrick on this. I think it should be straightforward. There's nothing to commend the Democratic candidate, Kamala Harris, to Conservatives at all. For all his flaws, and there are a good number, Donald Trump should be the person that British Conservatives should instinctively back. Obviously, they should be willing to work with the Democrats if they win, but the preference should be for the Republicans. That means it's for Donald Trump. I'm glad that Robert Jenrick has said so in clear, unambiguous terms.
Corvia Ranger is with us, Mark, so do stay on the line. Corvia Ranger, of course, former advisor to Boris Johnson and Conservative peer. Do Conservatives here in Britain really want to hitch their wagon, Corvia, to a chaotic and unpredictable figure like Donald Trump?
Well, the answer is, well, I would say personally, no, because the challenge here is the politics in America is so personality-driven. And yes, as Mark quite rightly says, if it comes down to the policies and the approach, and we still have, Donald Trump is a populist, and Donald Trump 1.0 as president did do some very nationalistic, USA first policy decisions that helped the economy and grew the economy. And those are the kind of things that Conservatives may be looking at and saying, OK, we can understand that. But what we have is now Donald Trump 2.0. And as sort of I think Barack Obama just said the other day, do we really want to see what his words, not mine, loonier, older, without guardrails Donald Trump looks like? And I think that's the fear that politicians here, Conservative politicians, have about aligning themselves with the figure of Donald Trump. It's not about the party, it's not about the policies, it's about the individual. And I think that's why you're hearing a lot of sort of quieter noises from Conservatives here about who they're going to be supporting, and rather, let the American people decide on which one of these individuals they think would be fit for their presidency.
Mark, a few Conservatives have broken ranks and offered their support to Kamala Harris in the race for the White House. Can they call themselves Conservatives and back the Democrats for November the 5th?
I mean, I think it's an extraordinary decision. I mean, I agree that you know, we shouldn't sort of wholly hitch our wagon to Donald Trump. The Labour Party, I think, were considering sending over 100 paid-for activists to campaign for the Democrats. I'm not suggesting the Conservatives should do that.
I understand I understand that they have gone, but that they were volunteers. And Nigel Farage.
But I don't think the Conservatives should go down that sort of path. So it's more like expressing an opinion. But be in no doubt on the broad thrust of things: lower taxes, a market economy, a climate for business. Trump is a lot closer to where British Conservatives should stand, and Kamala Harris is miles away. Government spending will go up, regulation will go up, wokery will go up. So it seems to me that for all of Trump's foibles, for all of his downsides, this is a pretty clear decision, because the Democrat candidate is so far off to the left that I am bemused that a British Conservative would be egging on the Democrat ticket in this election. Far to the left, I would say, even of Keir Starmer.
Indeed. By the way, Director Harry, I think we got some great footage of Donald Trump working in a McDonald's. There you go. The guy has definitely attacked this election race, hasn't he? He's been very active. He's done all the interviews, all the podcasts, and now he's at McDonald's making fries, doing that quite well, I think. Colvia, I honestly can't believe my eyes here, but I understand that Michael Gove is supporting Kamala Harris. Are Conservatives who back Harris for the presidency traitors?
No, look, each individual, and Michael Gove has stepped back from frontline politics, so he's as an individual now, and he can back who he likes. But I think, I agree with Mark, this is about policies. Which policies do Conservatives believe in? And on that basis, Conservatives support the Republican Party. But the problem with American politics is about the personality, and that role of presidency is about the individual. And I know what Mark's saying as well, but also you've got to have a certainty in the rationale of the president. And I think the challenge we're also facing here is you're never quite sure what you're going to get with Donald Trump. Is it going to be the cheeseburger, or is it going to be the fries that he's serving? And you never know. So I think that's the problem. And he is also, it appears, not doing the debates with Kamala Harris, because when it comes to the debates on policy and political issues, I think he's struggling to hold the narrative.
OK, Colvia, briefly, if you can, is he the lesser of two evils? Would you vote for Donald Trump if you were a US citizen?
You know what? I think the US citizens have a very difficult choice. I'm not sure. I would feel entirely comfortable voting for Donald Trump, but I am a Conservative, so I would have to sort of maybe hold my nose.
There you go. Fascinating stuff. Listen, Mark Littlewood, really good to see you. We'll catch up soon. The director of the Popular Conservatives, and Colvia Ranger, former advisor to Boris Johnson and Conservative peer, is back shortly. But next up, as leadership hopeful Robert Jenrick promises to axe carbon targets, should the Tories scrap net zero altogether to win the next election? I'll be asking a top party insider next.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
There's a huge financial and mental strain for parents, but we have this system now where it talks about they bringing a family member to help, but I don't think that's happening a lot of the time. I think people are having to be off work, look after their child, and often, sorry to say, but their school always calls the mum, and then you have this situation where you have nobody to look after your child. People's grandparents don't seem to want to do it so much, and often family members aren't just down the road. So what we have is no village, and I think it's really important when you have a child that you need that village.
Are children getting more sicker than they used to be, or is it just that we take the odd sniffle a bit more seriously now since 2020?
Yes, I do think the odd sniffle can be. I know in my school they say 3 days away, you know, the slightest little thing, and it's like...
If you have a cold?
Yeah, no, please, go in, yeah. And
3 days off if you have a cold for a child, and we wonder why all these parents aren't at work. I think some of these figures about people who could be working and aren't working, they're not necessarily on benefits, but some of them will be people who, during the pandemic, particularly parents, decided to get a different work-life balance. They quite liked being at home, and they realised the children are benefiting from it. Do you think those people are in these statistics Annette.
of people staying at home with not working.
Who decided to not go back to work of working age?
Yes, I think a lot of people don't want to go into an office anymore either. They've had that little bit of freedom and they're like, I'm not going in. And I know employers are trying to get them to go in, but they just want to be at home. They want to be near their children if their children are sick, whether that's the mum or the dad. And also a lot of people don't live near their office or wherever. They don't want to commute. Train fares have gone up, so they say, well, why should I pay? So you have this whole knock-on effect throughout the economy.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Why go out on a Friday night when Friday night comes straight to your home?
Talking about.
Join me and my A-team of top pundits. Chemistry tonight is electric. As we tackle the big stories of the day with wit, insight and fearless energy.
Man of the people.
It's all vibe. Just a filing cabinet on wheels with a tie on.
So, order in Friday Night Live with me, Mark Dolan, every Friday at 8, only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Every Saturday, 10 till 12, we'll bring you all of the news that you need to know. We'll also remind you that there is so much to smile about.
It's my favourite time of the week. I get to relax, enjoy some light-hearted stories, and let Ellie teach me about fashion too.
That's Saturday Morning Live, every Saturday, 10 till 12.
Only on GB News, Britain's news channel.
I'm Martin Daubney. This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
Looking forward to this in 10 minutes' time in my Take at 10. I will be declaring in terms of the last two candidates for the Tory leadership. Should it be Badenoch? Should it be Jenrick? I'll be passing verdict at 10. Don't miss it. But as leadership hopeful Robert Jenrick promises to axe carbon targets, should the Tories scrap net zero altogether to win the next election? Let's get the views of Robert Jenrick supporter and former deputy chairman of the Conservative Party, Brendan Clark-Smith. Brendan, good to see you again. Now, Robert Jenrick is going to look at these carbon targets, and clearly he wants a more sensible approach to net zero. Why don't the Tories scrap it altogether?
That's a really good question, Mark. Yeah, I try to avoid using the word net zero in any of my literature. I always find it's a really toxic phrase. But I think if you knock on people's doors and say, do you care about the environment? Do you want to pollute less? Do you want to move to more efficient or so on ways of generating energy, then most people will say yes. But what we actually see is a lot of box ticking. We see other countries. We look at countries such as China, for example, who are constantly building even more coal-fired power stations. And what do? We ask the little old lady down the road to rip out a boiler and again, we plaster all our farming land with solar panels. So for me, I think it needs a review. I think Ed Miliband does some really, really scary things in his first days in office, whether that's with North Sea oil or pausing nuclear and our energy security. So, yeah, I mean, net zero, really, I think it gets me 0 votes on the doorstep. That's all I say.
Indeed. I mean, would you advise Robert Jenrick to go the whole hog and just say we're going to axe that 2050 target? Yes, we're going to clean up the planet. Absolutely. We're going to go for green renewables. We're going to have smart energy, all the rest of it, insulate homes. No one is against that. But do you think he should replicate Reform UK by saying net zero itself and 2050 now off the table?
Yeah, I mean, the thing about net zero, it's a global ambition, really, isn't it? You can't just do it with one country. It doesn't stop at the borders there. So one thing that we always used to pride ourselves on, Mark, is, we had the inventors, the innovators. You look at some of the things that Elon Musk's doing at the moment, and you innovate your way to improve the environment. And what happened to the ambition with that? There doesn't seem to be any. Again, it seems to be all these very superficial things. Again, I mentioned about farmland earlier on. And what do? We import our avocados and our food and everything else over here, and I'm sure there's plenty of carbon emissions associated with that. So, yeah, I think there's a case of getting rid of the phrase, certainly.
Wow.
But it's...
Yeah. Well, just sorry to interrupt you, but can I ask you why you're backing Robert Jenrick for leader?
Well, I think it comes down to, what Colville was just saying in your discussion, really, about the presidential election. Let's just move away from the personality politics for a second. You'll remember I was a big Boris Johnson supporter before. I think you would struggle to match Boris in terms of personality. But what we actually need in the Conservative Party now are some actual policies, and we need to actually deliver. And I think if you look at Robert Jenrick, he's the only person who's really got a plan that he's going to implement now. He's not looking at some big discussion that could take years. He's actually identified what the problem is. He's told us what he's going to do about it, whether that's with the ECHR, whether that's repealing the Blair and Brown era legislation that's there, that's holding us back with equalities and human rights and so on. He's got a plan for building and densification in the cities. He's got a plan for energy. He's got a plan for sorting out all these Mickey Mouse degrees and everything else. And I think there's something that's really, really exciting there for a Conservative.
Briefly, if you can, Brendan, do you not think that he's rolled out too many policies too fast? Shouldn't he be spending the next 3 or 4 years coming up with those policies?
Yeah, I'm sure there will be other things that come along, but these are fairly core principles, Mark. I mean, we look at Brexit, for example. We looked at the whole point behind that was taking back control of our sovereignty and so on. And we have a situation which Robert has seen himself in the Home Office. You mentioned earlier I was deputy chair of the party. Of course, I resigned to support Robert and Bill Cash because we didn't think the legislation would actually help get those planes off. And we knew that because what's happening with the Human Rights Act and the ECHR and so on. So these are existential things. These are things that we know we've got to do. So I think Robert's on fairly safe ground with those. And return to Conservative principles, smaller state, lower taxes. It's not rocket science.
OK, stay with us, Brendan. I'm delighted to say that former top Labour government minister Bill Rammell is one of my star pundits this evening. Bill, Robert Jenrick would be quite a political foe for Keir Starmer. He's a dynamic figure with lots of popular policy ideas.
If you ask me crudely in party political interest, who would I prefer to win the Tory party leadership, I would say Jenrick, because I don't really buy his conversion from a pragmatic centrist Remainer to someone who's now trying to out Farage. I think it lacks authenticity, and that would explode under scrutiny. I also think his pitch to move the Tory party even further right, I don't think that adds up to a winning coalition. But I tell you this, I don't think either of the candidates has set out the kind of honest appraisal of why the Tories lost so badly, where 75% of people were determined to throw them out of office with mass tactical voting. Neither of them have come up with an analysis of why that's happened.
OK, brilliant stuff. Well, listen, Brendan, really good to see you again. We'll catch up soon. Brendan Clark-Smith, former deputy chairman of the party, and Bill Rammell, former Labour minister, returns in a couple of minutes. Next up in My Take at 10, Kemi or Robert Jenrick. I'll be giving my verdict. Don't go anywhere.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening and welcome to a GB News weather update from the Met Office. A stormy day out there with Storm Ashley gradually clearing. Then it will be a case of blustery showers in the north, but drier towards the south. Looking at the bigger picture, this is this area of low pressure named Storm Ashley that will gradually be moving its way north and eastward, but a real squeeze in those isobars indicating some strong winds. There are Met Office wind warnings in force. We could see gusts 70 to possibly 80 miles per hour as we go through Sunday night and into Monday morning, followed by blustery showers across Scotland and Northern Ireland, drier towards the south with lows of 11 to 12 degrees. So as we start Monday morning, still some very strong winds, especially across northern parts of Scotland and then into Orkney and Shetland. Again, 60, possibly even 70 miles per hour here. Further towards the west, it's a case of blustery showers moving through with some sunny spells too, and showers across Northern Ireland. Towards northern England and into Wales, some dry weather to start the day, but cloudier conditions further the south and east that you go with some outbreaks of rain on a Monday morning. So as we go through Monday and into the afternoon, showers continuing to push through swiftly across Scotland and Northern Ireland. Drier conditions towards the south of that with some hazy sunshine across parts of Wales, southwest England, with the cloud really restricted towards the far southeast where we could see some outbreaks of rain too. Temperatures just a touch down but still around 16 degrees as the high. As we go through Tuesday morning, there will be some bright skies out there with lighter winds but also some showers around, and that continues into the afternoon. It's a case of sunny spells and scattered showers as well. Then as we look into Wednesday, a little bit drier before gradually turning a bit more unsettled Thursday and into Friday. Bye-bye.
We can expect clear skies, leading to a light and warm day ahead. Lovely. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
This Good Luck.
It's Patrick Christie's tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive.
I mean, this is very good.
It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs.
That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News.
The People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Hi there, I'm Michelle Dewberry, and I'm going to take a second to tell you all about my show, Dubes & Co. We start off with the issues of the day. We then bring in both sides of the argument. We get rid of the disrespect, and then you throw me into the mix. And trust me, I'll tell it exactly how it is. And then, of course, the magic ingredient, you at home. We mix it all together, and what have we got? In my opinion, the best debate show in town. Monday to Friday, 6 till 7 on GB News, Britain's news channel.
A very good evening. It is 10 o'clock. On television, on radio and online, in the United Kingdom and across the world, this is Mark Dolan Tonight. In my take at 10, I'll be giving my verdict on which of the last two candidates should next lead the Conservatives. Will it be Jenrick or will it be Badenoch? I shall reveal all in just a moment. Also tonight, is the jailing of a woman for a race-hate post on social media an example of two-tier justice? And following the death of the Hamas leader, should Israel now lay down their guns and call an immediate ceasefire? I'll be asking former government minister Anne Widdecombe. Plus, tonight's top pundits fired up and ready to go. We've got leading journalist Linda Jubilee, Conservative peer and former advisor to Boris Johnson, Lord Coulvier Ranger, and former top Labour minister Bill Rammell. Will it be Jenrick? Will it be Badenoch? I'll be giving my verdict in 2 minutes' time after the headlines and Katie Bowen.
Mark, thank you, and a very good evening to you. It's just gone 10 o'clock. These are the latest headlines from the GB newsroom. NHS England has encouraged ambulance services to leave patients in hospital corridors after 45 minutes in a bid to respond faster to 999 calls. The reports from the Sunday Times come as the Health Secretary has pledged to build an NHS fit for the future. Announcing a consultation into the health service today, Mr Streeting said, "If we want to save the things we love about the NHS, then we have to change it." Millions of people are set to receive health monitoring smartwatches as part of Labour's plan to save the NHS. Well, there have also been reports that weight loss injections could be used to reduce unemployment. The Prime Minister says the whole country is behind Sir Chris Hoy following his terminal cancer diagnosis. Sir Keir Starmer posted on X saying, "Chris is a British sporting legend. To face his diagnosis with such positivity is inspiring." The 48-year-old has 2 to 4 years left to live. Sir Chris told the Sunday Times he's known for a year that his cancer is terminal. While undergoing treatment in February, Sir Chris said he felt forced to reveal his cancer diagnosis publicly. He's the third most decorated British Olympian of all time, with 6 career golds and 1 silver medal. Some news from the Middle East now. The United Nations peacekeeping force in Lebanon said in a statement tonight that an Israeli bulldozer has demolished an observation tower and the perimeter fence of a UN post in southern Lebanon. Israel has said that it has hit Hezbollah's intelligence headquarters in its latest strike on Lebanon's capital, Beirut, today, while Hamas-run authorities say at least 87 people were dead or missing following a strike on northern Gaza late last night. Fans in the UK and around the world have held vigils this weekend in memory of Liam Payne, the One Direction star who died on Wednesday. A memorial event, which included a minute's silence, took place in London's Hyde Park earlier. It comes as Liam's father visited the hotel in Argentina yesterday, where his son died, while his bandmate Zayn Malik announced he'll reschedule his US tour after the heartbreaking death. Just briefly to Moldova, where we reported earlier on the voting happening there today. Early results are suggesting that around 56% of Moldovans have voted no to joining the EU in a referendum. Moldova applied to join the bloc after the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022. Results of that vote and the presidential election happening there are still to be confirmed. And finally, to the US, Republican presidential candidate Donald Trump has been on the campaign trail today, cooking fries at a McDonald's in Pennsylvania. If you're watching on television, you can see the former president working at the restaurant on your screens. While serving customers, he wished the Vice President, Kamala Harris, a happy birthday as she turns 60 today. Those are your latest GB News headlines for now. I'm Katie Bowen. Now it's time for Mark.
For the very latest GB News direct to your smartphone, sign up to News Alerts by scanning the QR code or go to gbnews.com/alerts.
Thank you, Katie. Do Labour underestimate Nigel Farage and Reform UK at their peril? I'll be asking former Government Minister Anne Widdecombe, plus tomorrow's papers and my pundits. But first, my take at 10. Good evening. Now, the race for the Tory leadership is hotting up, with 2 strong candidates fighting it out for a job that, frankly, no one should really want. Why? Well, it's 5 years of guaranteed opposition and the statistical likelihood of a further defeat in 2029, assuming that Labour can get their act together. Not to mention the small matter of one Nigel Paul Farage, who parked his tanks on the Conservatives' lawn in July of this year, achieving an extraordinary 4.1 million votes, a figure that could double by the time of the next election. So, in the blue corner, it's Robert Jenrick, who has the air of a middle manager who has suddenly surprised his colleagues by turning up to work in a Harley-Davidson. And in the bluer corner, Kemi Badenoch, the strict new head teacher at school who actually expects the staff and pupils to do some work. Jenrick is feisty, fearless and in a hurry. Kemi is calm, methodical, principled and terrifying. Jenrick has gone for policy detail. Scrap the BBC licence fee, a parliamentary lock on immigration, a rethinking of human rights, the axing of climate targets. The guy is a walking manifesto. Do you think that every morning he tells his wife that he's leaving the ECHR? I suspect he does. Meanwhile, Badenoch is offering no detail, no policy, just a trust me, I got this type of message. So for the membership, it's either an act of intellectual calculation or an act of faith. But faith is what politics is all about. And you can have faith in someone like Kemi Badenoch, whose experience of socialism growing up in Nigeria has made her a conservative to her core. A profound allergy to leftist progressivism inhabits every cell of her body. It's who she is. She voted to leave in 2016, unlike her opponent, and sees Brexit as unfinished business. Too right. She slays anyone who faces her at the dispatch box. She would make mincemeat of Starmer and has stood up to the worst excesses of woke, in particular taking 2 chunks out of the virtue-signalling Doctor Who actor David Tennant, who said that he'd like her to, and I quote, shut up and go away. Well, shutting up and going away are not 2 of her great qualities, which we're going to discover if she prevails. Now, some have said that Kemi Badenoch is too pugnacious. She could pick a fight with her own reflection. Well, that is true. But that's because she is someone who will fight. She'll fight for what is right. She'll fight for common sense. She will fight to win. Whilst I maintain that Rishi Sunak was an outstanding Prime Minister, that's right, I think he was a brilliant Prime Minister, and I did back him for the leadership in 2022, the other candidate that caught my eye all those years ago was Kemi Badenoch, and I haven't changed my mind. This is an excerpt from my big opinion on Sunday, the 17th of July, 2022. Take a listen. Then there's Kemi Badenoch, the surprise candidate. A true fiscal and social conservative, an engineer who wants to look at data and rethink our economy and our society. Praise the Lord. And she's un-PC. When she saw 2 unisex toilets at her campaign launch venue during the week, she stuck a men's toilet symbol on one door and a women's toilet symbol on the other. She's young. She's clever, she's got energy, and she could just be the unexpected star that Margaret Thatcher was all the way back in 1975, when she became the leader of the Conservative Party. She was not the first obvious choice. Personally, if I can't have Rishi, I'll bite your hand off for Badenoch. And it's my profound hope that it goes down to those 2 in the final round. If Rishi can't win the final round, then the other candidate, in my view, has to be Badenoch. As an anti-woke, highly talented woman of colour who flipped burgers at McDonald's in her youth, she would be Labour's worst nightmare. I actually think their heads would explode. Is it time now to follow the Kemi trail? Dare the Tories look to the future and roll the dice on this young talent? With every day that goes by, I further warm to the idea. Well, I couldn't have put it better myself. That was 2 years ago. Kemi Badenoch is the only one who can save the Tories. And while she's at it, she might just save Britain too. By a whisker, I think that Kemi Badenoch should lead the Conservatives. I think Robert Jenrick is an outstanding candidate. He's got to be her deputy leader. He's got to be, what's he going to be, Shadow Home Secretary. He's got to have a big job. But the bottom line is it's Badenoch all the way for me. But your reaction and your vote, let me know who you think should be leader of the Conservative Party. gbnews.com/your say. I'll get to your messages shortly. But first, tonight's top pundits. We have journalist and broadcaster Linda Jubilee. We have Conservative peer and former advisor to Boris Johnson, the one and only Lord Colville Ranger, and former top Labour minister Bill Rammell. Well, Linda, let me start with you. Which of the 2 candidates would Labour fear the most?
Kemi Badenoch, I think. I think that Robert Jenrick has become a very polished, able politician. But if it comes to being a leader, I think it's Kemi Badenoch. I think she has that edge. I think she can resonate with the public. I mean, we've just had this conversation. Does she resonate with the membership, though, which is a key issue? But I think that she reminds me a bit of Margaret Thatcher. And I think the thing about the Conservative Party is they're always looking for the next Margaret Thatcher. And I think if you look closely at Kemi Badenoch, you will see some similarities in the way she talks in a conceptual way. She talks about her vision. She talks about ideas in the way Margaret Thatcher did.
Because Margaret Thatcher was a chemist, very scientific.
Exactly.
Kemi Badenoch, an engineer.
Yeah, rational, very, very rational people. But beyond that, it's this ability to talk conceptually, which I think Margaret Thatcher did.
Kulveer, is Kemi Badenoch Margaret Thatcher 2.0?
Well, look, every Conservative leader or wannabe leader in some ways aped the great Margaret Thatcher over the last 20, 30 years. So
but not always successfully.
Yeah. Not always
Boris
successfully.
was blonde, Liz Truss drove the tank.
She had the hair at one point, yeah. But on the serious side, you know, I agree with what Linda's saying. Look, I have a lot of time for Robert, and actually all the candidates. I think one of the things that it has shown is that the Conservative Party has got a battery of people there, even in what remains after the last general election, of people that are of quality and calibre to take the party forward. And they're all been friends of mine, so I've stayed out of declaring who I'm supporting. But I have to say, I am supporting Kemi now, because I think for all the reasons that you said 2 years ago, Mark, but also the job of the Leader of the Opposition, which is what they are auditioning for, is to tackle the government of the day on where they are failing, on what they are doing, on actually holding them to account. And for that, you must be aggressive. You must be setting your stall out, and you must know the values that you stand on to deliver that. Robert, as fantastic a politician that he is, and I agree he'll have a big job in the shadow cabinet, hopefully in the cabinet in the future, has set out an array of policies for the here and now. But if he becomes Prime Minister, that would happen in the best part of 5 years from now. Where would those policies be? So there's a bit of a tactical approach that he's taking to his campaign. But it has given him a lot of airtime, a lot of coverage, and therefore a lot of spotlight that's helped his campaign. But Kemi, as you've said, Linda, has spoken in conceptual terms. She's dealing with the issues of what it means to be a Conservative, of what it means to stand your ground, and what it means to attack the government, which is the job of the Leader of the Opposition.
Now, Bill, understandably, you are enjoying this Labour government with a bumper majority and a strong mandate to change Britain for the best. And also, I'm sure you're enjoying this Tory chaos. But the issue you've got is that if Kemi Badenoch wins, Starmer's toast, isn't he?
No, he's not. And look, I said to you previously, personally, in crude party political terms, I prefer Jenrick, because I think he's inauthentic. He's gone from being a centrist Remainer to now trying to out Farage, and I don't think that's a route to success for the Tories. But I think there's a fundamental challenge to both of them. Neither of them have faced up to why 75% of people desperately wanted to see the back of the Tories at the general election. And there's no sense that they're willing to take their party by the scruff of the neck and drag it back to the mainstream of politics, as Kinnock did, as Blair did, as Cameron did, and as Keir Starmer did. There's not that courage to tell your party some home truths.
Well, I wonder whether Kemi Badenoch, Linda, is the embodiment of courage.
I think she has done that, though. I think Kemi Badenoch has spoken about the problems quite clearly. And I think she has talked, as I said earlier in conceptual terms, about what she has to do to bring it round. Maybe not bring it back into what you would regard as centrist or mainstream, but she's certainly laid out where she thinks the party should be and how it went wrong.
Bill, if Kemi Badenoch wins, right, she destroys Labour's identity politics, right? No one can talk about being the first woman chancellor or this of colour or that of gender, because she would be a black woman who's also a Conservative. You know, so that kills Labour's identity policy. And weekly Prime Minister's questions will be a bloodbath, won't it?
No, it won't. I mean, you know, Starmer could hold his own, and identity politics don't win general elections.
Right.
But you know, Badenoch has shown no sense that she really understands on austerity, on extremism, on a whole host of issues, why the Tories lost so badly. And I think you do. Part of the way you win in politics is demonstrating that you can take on your own party and reform it. And I don't think that's cut through.
Well, that's what we're going to do. Last word, Linda.
Well, because one of the reasons the Tories lost is because they completely lacked unity and was totally swallowed up by internecine fighting. And I think she did understand that.
All right.
She did talk about sorting it out.
Well, let me tell you that it's all kicking off online. Our brilliant digital producer, Reese, is getting that monologue ready to put out there and break the internet because, yes, I am backing Kemi Badenoch. So your reaction, gbnews.com/your say. And I'll get back to Cool Veer at 10:30 with the papers for his thoughts on Badenoch versus Jenrick. But first up, it's time for the Great British Giveaway. And the clock is ticking on getting your entry in as lines are closing on Friday. So make sure you don't miss out on your chance to win £36,000 in tax-free cash. Here's how you do it. It's official, I'm backing Kemi Badenoch for the Tory leadership. Anne Widdecombe, I'm not sure she's happy about my decision. She's next.
I'm Andrew Pearce. This is GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
In the GB newsroom, we bring you the news as it happens.
With our team of dedicated journalists across the UK,
We're ready to keep you up to date with what's happening every half an hour, every single day. Bulletins here on GB News,
the People's Channel,
Britain's news channel.
I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg and this is GB News, Britain's news channel.
This is GB News, Britain's news channel.
This week, Free Speech Brighton, a sister group of the Free Speech Union, claimed that they were kicked out of a pub in the city for discussing trans issues in schools. The group booked a room in a pub for an evening of speeches and discussion when they claimed security guards came and asked them to leave after one speaker began to talk about this topic. Now, a clip of the evening was, in fact, posted to social media. Can you give us some background to what happened, what the event was for, and why you booked it?
Our normal pub was being refurbished, so about 3 weeks ago I went in and booked a local pub for a meeting, and they didn't ask any questions about what sort of meeting. It was in a back room. It was mainly secluded from the rest of the pub, so I thought it would be fine. But anyway, they didn't ask any questions. They took my booking. We arrived, I set up. The first speaker started speaking, who's a retired teacher who is concerned about trans in schools and how that affects children. But she was talking purely about children. She was not talking about adults who have protected characteristics, obviously. And then towards the end of her speech, I became aware of security guards standing behind me in the middle room. So I went to have a quick word with them and see what they wanted. And they said, we've had a complaint. And I said, what's the complaint? And they wouldn't say. Then they said, will you come and talk to the landlord? So I went to the front of the bar and they indicated this chap was the landlord, but he looked about 20, so I don't think he was the landlord. So I said, I hear you have a complaint about us. Can you tell me what it is? And he couldn't.
That sounds very Kafka-esque, as though you've committed a crime, but they can't tell you what the crime
is. Well, that's what I couldn't understand, because, you might... Obviously, they can't tell you who the complainant is, but they should be able to tell you what the complaint is.
GB News, the People's Channel.
We're proud to be GB News, the People's Channel. And as you know, we always love to hear your views. Now, there's a new way of getting in touch with us at gbnews.com/your say. By commenting, you can be part of a live conversation and join our GB News community. You can even talk to me, Bev Turner, or any of the members of the GB News family.
I'm Bev Turner. Thank you for joining us on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, it's official. I'm backing Kemi Badenoch to be the next leader of the Conservatives. A massive reaction on our message board, gbnews.com/your say. Girl Biker says, Mark, I have voted for Kemi. Wayne says, Kemi would be my choice. She speaks with passion from the heart and won't be messed with. Mick says, Kemi saves the Tories. No thanks. Tories are toast. Vote reform. Spot on Mark says, Annette, I'm for Kemi too. She's got what it takes. Tim, definitely Kemi. Good good, by the way, that she worked at McDonald's, the same as Donald Trump. OK, and last but not least, Richard says it's easy to understand why the Tories lost the election. They failed completely on immigration and taxation. Well, can Kemi Badenoch turn that ship around? Let's get the views of former Government Minister Anne Widdecombe. Anne, we've got lots of topics to get through tonight. But your reaction to my advocacy for Kemi Badenoch as next leader of the Conservatives?
Well, let me preface it by saying that I don't much care who loses the next election for them. And from that point of view, I'm not backing, in inverted commas, anybody. But I'm very surprised at your choice. Why won't she meet Robert Jenrick in a face-to-face, direct, head-on debate? Now, is she for it? If so, how on earth is she going to cope with Keir Starmer come a general election? Anyway, so that is the first thing. The second thing is Jenrick has at least come up with some solid proposals for dealing with the boats and for dealing with immigration. I have yet to hear any such solid proposals from Kemi Badenoch. Now, you know, you all talk about her courage. Courage is about, A, facing your opponents in open debate and not worrying at all. And because if you seriously believe that you're right, then that should not pose you with any problem. And then thoughtfulness is also coming up with rock-solid policies. No, sorry, I don't share your view as to what I would do were I a Tory, but oh, thank heaven, I'm not a Tory.
Well, indeed, you've, of course, joined Reform UK. You are now their official spokesperson. I mean, Anne, I would argue that Kemi Badenoch is avoiding a face-to-face not because she doesn't enjoy debate or combat. She's the most pugnacious member of Parliament out there. What she doesn't want is an unedifying spectacle of two Conservatives tearing chunks out of each other on national television.
Well, they don't have to. They can discuss policy. They can be courteous. They can have a perfectly sensible, reasonable debate. And if they aren't capable of that, well, that sums up the Tory party.
Also, I would argue that Kemi Badenoch has character, she has personality, exactly like Margaret Thatcher and exactly like, dare I say it, Anne Widdecombe.
No, you dare not say it. Move on, please.
I think they're cut from the same cloth. The reason being, well, because you're courageous, you're principled, you're consistent, and so is Kemi Badenoch. She's a Conservative to her core. She grew up in Nigeria. She experienced socialism. She has a cellular allergy to woke progressivism.
Yes, I've got all of those things. Well, not the background, but I've got all those attitudes as well. But additionally, I wouldn't flunk a debate with an opponent. I do believe it's respectful to the membership to go head-to-head and let them see and let them make an informed choice. And I would always have detailed policies on anything that I was proposing. I did disagree with one of your panellists who said, well, Robert Jenrick's got policies, but what use will they be in 5 years' time? He's talking about what we need to do now, and one can assume that he will build on that and modify it over the course of the next 5 years, depending on what happens. That is just very basic Ars Politica.
However, isn't Robert Jenrick simply a Poundland Nigel Farage?
No, I mean, he's not a patch on Nigel Farage, neither of them is. But I think that, you know, as I say, he puts forward policies, and that's interesting.
Well, he's putting forward Reform UK policies, and he's supposed to be a Conservative.
Well, I dare say the Conservatives will take their lead from Reform UK on some things, and so they should if they're sensible.
And do you think that Reform UK are more likely to be able to do business politically with Robert Jenrick than Kemi Badenoch, who famously fell out with Nigel Farage?
I don't think we're looking to do business, as you put it, with anybody. We're looking to win in our own right. You know, in the last general election, everybody said we wouldn't get any seats. We got 5 seats. You know, we've made the bridgehead. We're now about to fight the local elections. Well, I say about to, in next May. And so we're gearing up. We're confident in our own right. We don't need to do business with either of them.
But Reform UK are essentially the same party as the Conservatives. I mean, this is the territory of the People's Front of Judea, isn't it? All you're going to do is gift Keir Starmer another 5 years in power if the two groups don't unite. And my suggestion is that that might be more difficult under the pugnacious and rather Farage sceptic Kemi Badenoch.
No, when you say, you know, they have to unite, the fact is that we stand for things that both Labour and Tories believe in. And one of the reasons that we did not, one of the reasons that the Tories lost so badly at the last election was that people do prefer us. Now they've got the example in front of them, we can actually win. I mean, the number of people who said to me in the course of the last election, I really want to vote for you, but you can't win, can you? They now know that we can. And I think it's going to be very different next time round. We won't be giving Starmer another 5 years. The nation has had enough already. After 100 days, it ain't going to give him another 5 years.
And always a treat. I wish we had longer. My thanks to former government minister and now Reform UK spokesperson Anne Widdecombe. Always fascinating. Your reaction to what Anne had to say. gbnews.com/your say. Next up, tomorrow's papers. Don't go anywhere.
Good evening and welcome to a GB News weather update from the Met Office. A stormy day out there with Storm Ashley gradually clearing. Then it will be a case of blustery showers in the north, but drier towards the south. Looking at the bigger picture, this is this area of low pressure named Storm Ashley that will gradually be moving its way north and eastward, but a real squeeze in those isobars indicating some strong winds. There are Met Office wind warnings in force. We could see gusts 70 to possibly 80 miles per hour as we go through Sunday night and into Monday morning, followed by blustery showers across Scotland and Northern Ireland, drier towards the south with lows of 11 to 12 degrees. So as we start Monday morning, still some very strong winds, especially across northern parts of Scotland and then into Orkney and Shetland. Again, 60, possibly even 70 miles per hour here. Further towards the west, it's a case of blustery showers moving through with some sunny spells too, and showers across Northern Ireland. Towards northern England and into Wales, some dry weather to start the day, but cloudier conditions further the south and east that you go with some outbreaks of rain on a Monday morning. So as we go through Monday and into the afternoon, showers continuing to push through swiftly across Scotland and Northern Ireland. Drier conditions towards the south of that with some hazy sunshine across parts of Wales, southwest England, with the cloud really restricted towards the far southeast where we could see some outbreaks of rain too. Temperatures just a touch down, but still around 16 degrees as the high. As we go through Tuesday morning, there will be some bright skies out there with lighter winds, but also some showers around, and that continues into the afternoon. It's a case of sunny spells and scattered showers as well. Then as we look into Wednesday, a little bit drier before gradually turning a bit more unsettled Thursday and into Friday. Bye-bye.
Join me, Camilla Tominey, for a frank and honest discussion with those in power that cuts through the spin and gets to the heart of the issues shaping our nation.
You haven't confirmed that you want to stand as leader, but you haven't ruled it out either.
This report basically says that he's not fit to stand trial. Is he indecisive? Incompetent?
I deliver the dose of reality Westminster needs. That's the Camilla Tominey Show at 9:30 every Sunday on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
It's Patrick Christie's Tonight, and here we do things differently.
It's explaining the absolute madness of this, doesn't it?
It's explosive. I mean, this is very good. It's lively.
850. Your government sat there, Sean, and it did nothing.
It's controversial.
And the Middle East has been in turmoil since before I was born.
It's everything you need to kickstart your evening.
Everyone's had their Weetabix tonight. I love to see it.
That's Patrick Christie's Tonight, weeknights from 9 p.m. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
OK, lots to get through now, and we'll start with tomorrow's papers. We start with a Metro, a really sad story that we broke last night on the show. A hero of a human being. Supporters rally around cycling great Sir Chris Hoy after shock cancer news. He has 2 to 4 years left following the diagnosis of terminal cancer. He's got 2 children, a 7-year-old and a 10-year-old, and a wife who has major health issues herself. So it's been an awful time for the family. But the nation is just coming together to salute this great man and to wish him as much of a full and happy life as he can possibly have. Online con epidemic revealed 9 million of us scammed. Was that Labour voters? Wait, let me just read the detail here. Careful, Bill's not happy. Almost 1 in 5 people has been the victim of a finance scam in the last year. That's 9 million Brits. The overwhelming majority, 76%, were online cons delivered through social media sites, according to research. They included scammers posing as a friend in need, fake debt advice and pension or investment scams. It's really worrying, that story. We'll talk about that in a moment. The newspaper, UK air defence is unable to cope with missile attack, former ministers warn. The UK has a significant defence capability gap that means it would struggle to protect itself from a missile attack, according to former defence ministers. Liverpool pass first big test to stay top of the Premier League. And Hoy Courage, Olympic cyclist, praised after cancer revelation. Independent, inspiring Olympic legend Chris Hoy praised for courage as he reveals terminal cancer diagnosis. Back on air with the BBC yesterday, doing a sterling job as always. Also, health experts say budget plan not enough to fix the NHS. Fears have been raised that Health Secretary Wes Streeting's inflation-busting funding deal for the NHS will not be enough for him to pay for reforms that he wants. Sources have told The Independent the Department of Health and Social Care will get about 4%, between 7 and 8 billion, as Mr Streeting confirmed. He has mostly agreed his settlement with the Chancellor Rachel Reeves. The King's Fund have called it a standstill settlement. And Daily Telegraph now, Reeves is warned changes to inheritance tax will backfire. Newcastle takeover controlled by Saudi prince, leaks suggest. And patients who miss their appointments may face fines, says Health Secretary Wes Streeting. Daily Mirror, Sir Chris Hoy on terminal cancer shock. I'm overwhelmed by the love and support shown to my family and me. Pride of Britain exclusive. Charles, you are the best of us. The King has sent a heartfelt message to our inspiring Pride of Britain winners ahead of the awards' 25th anniversary. Daily Mail, my friends inherited a huge windfall and it's driving me mad with envy. Well, I can agree with that. Also, tsunami of asbestos deaths in schools. Hundreds of thousands of people will die from exposure to asbestos in Britain's schools, a bombshell report claims. Pupils and teachers face a tsunami of deaths after being exposed to the hidden killer every day. Oh, gosh. Well, it's an absolute disaster and an awful story. OK, folks, well, those are your front pages. Let's get reaction now from tonight's top pundits. I'm delighted to have Linda Jubilee, Corvia Ranger and Bill Rammell. Folks, lots of stories to sink our teeth into there. So let's start, if we can, with... I think we should take a look at this story in The Independent. Corvia. Health experts say budget plan not enough to fix the NHS. It really is a money pit, and even this generous Labour government won't be enough to satisfy the health authorities.
Well, it sounds like the approach the government are going to take, and what Wes Streeting is sort of signalling, is a consultation. And therefore, maybe kicking the can down the road a bit on what is it that the money's actually going to be spent on. Because if you're going to consult on what you're going to do, you're not going to spend the money now. You're going to be saying, well, let us decide what are the things we're going to fix. And you'd have hoped that those decisions were already ready to go, that their planning for changes to the NHS were there. We're now hearing from Wes Streeting, and I have a lot of time for Wes Streeting. I think he's been...
Great talent.
He is a talent.
Well, when Labour have a leadership election in 6 months' time, he'll be my choice.
One leadership election at a time and one Prime Minister change at a time. But I think what we're looking at here is Labour buying themselves time to decide what they're going to do and sort of fudge the budget because they don't want to make the big decisions, and also where will the money come from. So you can't have your cake and eat it, and the NHS is the big promise from Labour. They have huge political capital. This is the time for reform. It must be reformed. Make the big decisions and get on with it.
Yes, Bill, it's time for some very positive words about this Labour government. Wes Streeting is a significant talent and not afraid of a bit of tough love for the NHS.
Which is what's needed. I tell you what, if you look at the critique of the last Tory government, for the first 10 years, they starved the NHS of resources. In the last 4 years, they actually increased spending significantly, and yet output within the NHS barely rose a jot. That needs to be tackled. You do need more funding, but you need reform as well. And I think Wes is very committed to that. It's about greater use of technology. It's about a much stronger focus on prevention and a whole host of other things. I mean, I saw him quoted today saying he doesn't rule out charging people if they fail to come to an appointment. And I think that's probably the right approach, because there's a huge amount of money lost in that regard. So I think it is about progressive change and investment as well.
Well, indeed, in my big opinion earlier, I said that we had the wrong moment to have a Labour government in terms of the economy, because what we need actually is sort of fiscal self-control, and we need low taxes. We're not going to get that from Rachel Reeves. But Kulveer mentioned this. Labour do have political capital when it comes to the NHS, and they have influence, given the fact that the people that support the NHS are their natural electoral constituency. So this is not, in a way, Labour can make changes to the NHS that perhaps the Tories never could.
I think that's true, because they were the original architects of the NHS, as you've just pointed out. But I think it's enormously hard to get to the point where you're dealing with structural reform, which is what's required here. I mean, when the NHS was first developed, people would retire at 60 and die at 65. Now we've got a huge tranche of people which are economically inactive and requiring quite advanced medical treatment. Now, that's not going to be solved very easily at all. And when Wes Streeting says 10 years, it will take 10 years. Whether the Labour Party gets 10 years is another question, but it will take 10 years.
But it's doable. Look at the record of the last Labour government.
Doable.
When we left office in 2010, waiting lists were at 18 weeks and satisfaction levels with the NHS were at an all-time high. And again, it was investment and reform. It was also about working with the private sector. And I think there's no problem with that if you're actually getting the right results.
But you're right. You have to accept it's about reform. It's not just about money. It's about structural reform. And actually, I agree with him when he says that people should be penalised for not turning up for appointments. Absolutely, that should happen. You should also consider maybe you have to charge for some initial appointments.
I think
we're all.
No, I wouldn't go that far.
No, I know you wouldn't, because you're more politically involved than I am. But I can say something that I believe that might have to happen in some way.
Because then the public would take what's available less for granted.
Yeah.
But I think we all will violently agree on what reform needs to happen. The one thing I will say is it's the pace. Politicians, the sands of time run out as soon as you get into office. And if you start getting stuck into the myriad of consultations and thinking about things and how long it will... That's why Labour have the opportunity, use the time they have wisely, get on with it. They've got the report. But also what Wes Streeting has highlighted, this change from National Health Service to neighbourhood health service, is actually the right direction of travel. It's about getting the service down to people, getting rid of the bureaucracy, tearing apart. So he's saying the right things. He needs to be unleashed to be able to get on with the job.
Do Labour have the stomach for the fight, though? Because this will be an almighty political...
That's right. And what I think is, how quickly will Wes Streeting go from being a champion and being championed as someone who can save the NHS to the NHS turning on him? And he's got to walk that fine line. But again, he needs to be brave, and so does this Prime Minister, to back him to get this reform done.
I think that's true, but we also need to recognise and expose that there are vested interests within the National Health Service, whether it's, the people who are running the hospitals, whether it's the GPs who've been a block on reform as well.
The consultants that don't work weekends. Because no one gets ill on a Sunday.
Well, I've spent the morning in hospital this morning, Hillingdon Hospital.
Are you OK? You could have called in sick tonight, you know.
No, well, it was a ghost ship in there. Nothing was open. I mean, none of the ancillary services.
After politics, I was a university vice-chancellor, and a senior medic said to me, don't get ill at the weekend.
It's really serious.
It's really dangerous.
Yeah, it's very dangerous.
OK, well, listen, speaking of dangerous, what about this as an absolutely bonkers story? Black academics have been told being nice perpetuates white supremacy, this according to The Telegraph. A study says that university bosses use niceness to perpetuate white cultural norms rather than challenging and addressing racism. This niceness is then adopted by black and Asian academics because it makes them more palatable to white groups, according to Professor Kulwant Bhopal of the University of Birmingham. Can you make sense of this, Bill?
No. as a former university vice-chancellor, an awful lot of research is really, really good. A small minority borders on bonkersness, and I think this is an example. The idea that a black person, by being nice, trying to get on with people, trying to work with people is wrong, is for the birds. And it's frankly born of a kind of Marxist, Trotskyist view that the only way you make progress is through conflict and confrontation. And I think the vast majority of black people and the vast majority of black academics reject that approach.
Yeah, cool, Veer. I mean, what do you make of this? It seems symptomatic of what's happening at university at the moment.
It does, but also I think it's that question of free speech, that you should be able to say what you want to say, not have to sugarcoat it to make it acceptable, and how you deliver a message. And if you don't do that, then somehow you are not trying to deliver that message, you're doing something completely else. I think this as Bill says, we do get some strange things coming from academic research, and I'll put this in that X-Files box of very strange things.
It's a minority, but...
Yeah, and at its simplest, being nice to people, being polite to people is a mark of respect to your fellow human beings. Point ends.
Point ends indeed. Well, listen, lots more to come. More front pages, some startling headlines. Plus, which candidate would Labour fear more, Robert Jenrick or Kemi Badenoch? We'll debate all of that next.
Martin Daubney, weekdays from 3 p.m.
We shot with the London Eye in the background, so it's quite an iconic shoot to do my cover of the Playboy magazine. So,
and you moved into the mansion for a while. Hugh called you the British Carmen Electra. You were one of his favourites, and it's renowned for its parties, of course. Over there, you must have had a few of those. Must have been wild times.
Fantastic parties, yeah. I mean, I met some incredible people. I will forever respect him and everyone at Playboy for the love and the support.
And you were on giant billboards, you were modelling for Nike, for Reebok, you're earning thousands of pounds a day.
Wow.
Absolutely like living the dream in terms of a model's lifestyle, and then things began to change.
Well, I've been living in Windsor for 4 years, and I can't get back into Windsor at the moment. The rents have gone ridiculous. I was paying $550 a month, and then the landlord just turned around one day and said I need to be paying $750. And I didn't really have a proper tenancy agreement, and I looked through it and I said, oh, can we get something in writing? And he was like, oh. So in the end, I wrote a tenancy agreement out from off the internet and I got it all signed. But then he went, if you're not going to pay the extra £250 a month, then you're going to have to move out. And I was like, well, you're going to have to give me 4 weeks. I can't just move out. I've got nowhere to go. And I think he thought he could just throw me out there and then. And he said, I've got someone that's going to move in that's going to pay £700-800 a month. So I went and got the tent, and I thought maybe this will be the way I can go for a few months or so, you know, and it was still summer a few months back when I became homeless. So, you know, I got the tent and I got all the cooking equipment and what have you from the money I got from some of the jobs I did, and I thought, you know what, I'm gonna go and be a free spirit for a bit, and I'm gonna have to just do my own thing. And you know what, it was the biggest mental relief to be able to have my own space. I mean, that was so liberating, absolutely.
GB News, the People's Channel.
Good Afternoon Britain isn't just about us. The wonderful thing about this programme is it's about everyone watching. It's an interactive programme.
Well, there absolutely is something to see here, and we're going to be talking about it more.
Whether it's breaking royal news, Will, please bring us up to date, or indeed a particularly punchy speech in the House of Commons.
Very, very curious.
We bring it to you live, and then we bring you live reaction as well.
That's Good Afternoon Britain, weekdays from midday.
Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Welcome to State of the Nation, daily plunge into the stories shaping our country. I'm Jacob Rees-Mogg, and Monday to Thursday we bring you the insights, the facts, the truth about how our country is being governed. Because what happens in Downing Street matters down your street. Tune in to State of the Nation every Monday to Thursday, 8 to 9 o'clock. Only on GB News, the People's Channel, Britain's news channel.
Well, Director Harry has more front pages, so let's have a look at the Express. And we've got the following. Overwhelmed by love, Sir Chris Hoy on the reaction to terminal cancer bombshell. And a shocking headline, main front page splash of tomorrow's Express. Shock survey reveals vulnerable victims of Labour's heartless heating cut. 84% of disabled pensioners will lose winter fuel payments. The Times, Rayner sets up council housing revolution. Angela Rayner is planning to double council house building after winning a boost in the budget to fund tens of thousands of extra homes. Get all of your medical records on an NHS app is the other story in The Times. We can go Daily Star now. Jeremy Clarkson, I was days away from death. I'm glad he's made a full recovery. True national hero, I think you'll agree. And also in the Daily Star, 8-toothed tree-eating fun sponge beetles aiming to annihilate festive joy. Invasion of the killer Grinches. A horde of misery guts 8-toothed beetles from Europe are doing their best to upset Santa by eating their way through all of our Christmas trees. Got time for The Guardian as well? OK, we'll come back to The Guardian in just a moment. Do any of you have like a plastic Christmas trees? I think my mother has a fake.
Yes, we do.
You do?
Yeah.
No.
And you keep it real, do you?
Yeah.
All
I
right.
always prefer a real one.
That's it.
Smell,
Do you not find that you start shedding in January, Bill? And then does the wife not chuck you out by mid-January, leave you on the street looking lonely and thin?
Yeah.
I've got one, because I wanted a black one.
All right.
Which I thought was quite stylish.
Oh, that's quite nice. And then some of them have got the lights built in, which is very fancy.
No, we haven't got that far. we just got a large plastic one, just because otherwise the boys tear it apart. And I thought, the real one, there's just needles everywhere.
It's never too soon to talk about.
Middle of October.
It's a little bit early. I'm going to get hell's dogs abuse from my viewers and listeners for talking about Christmas. Look, Daily Express, Bill, this is a worrying headline, isn't it? 84% of disabled pensioners will lose winter fuel payments. Is this Keir Starmer's poll tax?
No, look, there's always been a case for means testing the winter fuel allowance. In fact, the Tories in 2017, it was part of their manifesto, that doesn't get exposed.
And Kemi Badenoch said, why are we giving rich people the allowance?
Yeah, absolutely. However, the level at which you means test, I think, is a challenge. And I hope within the budget, Rachel Reeves is going to do something about the level at which you start to lose the winter fuel allowance, because I think there are some real concerns there.
Is the political damage of the winter fuel payment cut done, would you say, Linda? Can they pull this out the fire?
I think it depends on what happens.
Cool.
No, I don't, because I think it set a tone for the first 100 days of this Labour government, and this was a big thing that has landed with the public and with Labour's own voters and with its own MPs about what they're trying to do.
I saw a poll a couple of weeks ago, and it's virtually 50-50 in terms of the principle of means testing the winter fuel allowance.
That would be fine, but Labour voters didn't think this would be one of the first things that Labour would do to pensioners. So that politically has jarred with its own members. So that's why you feel it's a misstep, and it has landed, and it's about whatever they do now to fix this. They might do in the budget, but it has been a real political. Well,
look, I'll accept this. It shouldn't have been detached from the budget. And one of the biggest critiques I'd make of what we've done in the first 3 months is having such a huge gap between the general election and your budget. It's unprecedented historically, and that's been filled by a whole lot of other stuff, whereas we should have been getting on the front foot with the budget decisions.
But I think the whole debacle over gifts and donations did more damage and will continue to do damage, because I think that illustrates a mindset issue. I had this discussion with several people over dinner last night, and that's critically important.
But what it does is, when you do one political mistake like that, and then you get another that happens like this, you find yourself 2 or 3 goals down early in the match, and that's what starts to set a tone. And you're right, Bill. You really should be back in government advising, because you're right. The messages should have come in earlier. The budget should have been there, and it felt like, despite the amount of time and effort and skills that Sir Keir Starmer had meant to put around him to be preparing to be Prime Minister, because there was a long run-up for him to this. All these missteps seem to have taken the wind out of his leadership and the government.
The cons has been hopeless. I mean, on the freebies, no rules have been broken. That remark
makes matters worse.
unlike under the Tories, where the rules were consistently broken. However, the tone was wrong. And what we need to do is to get on the front foot, start delivering, you know, things like Angela Rayner committing to a major social house building revolution, you know, the housing targets to meet the homes that people need, you know, a real living wage. Those are the things.
I think, Bill, you and I all know that when you get into power and you become, whether you're Prime Minister, government, mayor, you're always promising jam tomorrow, because that's what you have to do. You have to set the tone out. But people judge you on what you're still doing early up and the decisions you make. And I think that's been the problem for Labour. Yes, they'll make promises. Yes, they're going to fix the NHS.
And
yes, they're going to build more houses.
Stick with the
but
public.
they do. And I think that's been a real problem. And it's going to take a lot of effort, this budget, to turn it around. And at the moment, it doesn't feel like that's there.
Well, you know, we've got 2 weeks until the budget. I think you're going to see a real agenda being put forward at the budget, and then we need to start really turning things around.
Fair enough. Look, I want the government to do well, because if the government does well, the country does well, and we all do well. So, you know, to a certain degree, I want this to get better.
We can't have crazy talk like that. I mean, this is Labour we're talking about now.
And I don't think he believes it.
Of course not. The Times newspaper are this evening reporting that ambulances have been told to leave patients in hospital corridors in a bid to get waiting lists down. NHS England have suggested to paramedics to take up a policy called drop and go, which would mean that they'll abandon people after 45 minutes in A&E. Unsurprisingly, this is dividing workers in the NHS. Drop and go, I mean, that's something I thought that McDonald's did, or Pizza Hut. Well, they're doing it with your granny now. This is very concerning, isn't it, Linda?
Yeah, I don't even understand how that's supposed to work.
I mean, the idea is it's a taxi service, isn't it? You get dumped in A&E and the ambulance crew just off-ski.
Yeah, but there's still a pipeline problem, isn't there? Because
Correct.
there's a certain number of patients that have got to get into the hospital and they've got to be treated. Now, they're either in the ambulance, in the corridor, in A&E or on a ward, but there's still the same large number that have to be processed.
The big danger is that this becomes the norm in the NHS, isn't it, Bill?
Well, it is the norm.
Yeah, it is. But do you know what? When you're no longer involved in frontline politics, you're able to say, I'm not sure. And I'm not sure about this policy because it actually arises from what happened in January last year, where because the ambulance crews were staying with their patients, people who'd had a stroke or had a heart attack were waiting 90 minutes for an ambulance to arrive. And in part, this is intended to address that, but there are real risks associated with it as well.
Yeah,
and I think it really needs to be bottomed out as to what safeguards are in place.
So once they've been
people.
dropped in A&E because they can't be in the ambulance, what happens to A&E? That's what I'm saying.
I don't know, and that needs to be fully articulated and explained.
Cool, Vera, are we asking too much of our NHS?
No, I think what we're unfortunately dealing with is a point-to-point problem. We're not looking at the overall situation as we're trying to describe it. Fix this, and it doesn't matter what happens over there. Well, it does matter, because in the words of this article and how it's being reported, abandoning people, well, yes, there's a knock-on effect. Yes, we might fix it, that we might get the ambulances back out there and the paramedics back out there to get the times down in terms of dealing with it. But we've got another problem that we create at the other side where people are left abandoned. So I think this is symptomatic of there needing to be that sort of step-back root and branch reform, but quicker and faster. And I think stories like this just add more confusion and concern.
Well, listen, I wish we could talk longer, but the clock is against us. Bill, what a treat to have you on the show. Your first time, first of many, I hope. The brilliant Coolvia Ranger, the marvellous Linda Jubilee. Thanks for your company. I'm back on Friday at 8. Headliners is next.
A nice bright morning will generate a lovely warm day, right through to the evening. Boxed Solar, sponsors of weather on GB News.
Good evening and welcome to a GB News weather update from the Met Office. A stormy day out there with Storm Ashley gradually clearing. Then it will be a case of blustery showers in the north, but drier towards the south. Looking at the bigger picture, this is this area of low pressure named Storm Ashley that will gradually be moving its way north and eastward, but a real squeeze in those isobars indicating some strong winds. There are Met Office wind warnings in force. We could see gusts 70 to possibly 80 miles per hour as we go through Sunday night and into Monday morning, followed by blustery showers across Scotland and Northern Ireland, drier towards the south with lows of 11 to 12 degrees. So as we start Monday morning, still some very strong winds, especially across northern parts of Scotland and then into Orkney and Shetland. Again, 60, possibly even 70 miles per hour here. Further towards the west, it's a case of blustery showers moving through with some sunny spells too, and showers across Northern Ireland. Towards northern England and into Wales, some dry weather to start the day, but cloudier conditions further the south and east. There you go, with some outbreaks of rain on a Monday morning. So as we go through Monday and into the afternoon, showers continuing to push through swiftly across Scotland and Northern Ireland. Drier conditions towards the south of that with some hazy sunshine across parts of Wales, southwest England, with the cloud really restricted towards the far southeast where we could see some outbreaks of rain too. Temperatures just a touch down, but still around 16 degrees as the high. As we go through Tuesday morning, there will be some bright skies out there with lighter winds, but also some showers around, and that continues into the afternoon. It's a case of sunny spells and scattered showers as well. Then as we look into Wednesday, a little bit drier before gradually turning a bit more unsettled Thursday and into Friday. Bye-bye.
Heavy showers first thing will be followed by a warm, cosy day. Boxed boilers, sponsors of weather on GB News.
This good luck. GB News Breakfast. Every day from 6 a.m.
You know, is the fact that electric blanket sales going up actually a good thing? This means that people are switched on to the problems that the winter might hold, that they might have some defence against it, or is it a real indictment of a Labour government that they aren't going to be able to, you know, support elderly people in their hour of need?
Good morning, by the way.
Morning.
I think the sale of electric blankets may well be because we've had this cold snap because of the Arctic weather coming in from the north. However, I think it's an absolute reality that, as your clip said, that over 800,000 elderly people who are eligible for the winter fuel allowance, who can get pension credits, are struggling to apply. And so what is absolutely essential at the moment is that all of those older people who are eligible for pension credits do apply and do get what's owed to them. The benefits are owed to them. And the average that people will get through pension credits is about £78 a week. So that's definitely going to make a massive difference to people who are really struggling.
What can organisations like yours do to encourage people to, I guess, educate themselves on technology and make that first step into the digital world, which is very intimidating at times?
Absolutely, and that's what we do at Good Things Foundation. So we're a national charity. We work all across the whole of the UK. And in your clip there, you had Links Digital, and they're a member of what we call the National Digital Inclusion Network, which is a network of local charities, small local community organisations, food banks, job centres, old people's clubs. So anyone, any organisation at that local level.
GB News, the People's Channel.
A very good evening to you. I'm Katie Bowen, and these are your latest headlines from the GB Newsroom. NHS England has encouraged ambulance services to leave patients in hospital corridors in a bid to respond faster to 999 calls. The report from the Sunday Times comes as the Health Secretary has pledged to build an NHS fit for the future. Announcing a consultation into the health service today, Mrs Streeting said, if we want to save the things we love about the NHS, then we have to change it. Millions of people are set to receive health monitoring smartwatches as part of Labour's plan to save the NHS, while there have also been reports that weight loss injections could be used to reduce unemployment. Briefly to Moldova, where we reported earlier on the voting happening there today. Early results are suggesting that around 56% of Moldovans have voted no to joining the EU in a referendum. Moldova applied to join the bloc after the Russian invasion of Ukraine in 2022. Results of that vote and the presidential election happening there are still to be confirmed. Some news from the Middle East. The United Nations peacekeeping force in Lebanon said in a statement tonight that an Israeli bulldozer has demolished an observation tower and the perimeter fence of a UN post in southern Lebanon. Blasts have been heard in Beirut tonight as Israel warned it was preparing attacks on sites linked to the financial operations of Lebanon's Hezbollah group. Hamas-run authorities say at least 87 people were dead or missing following a strike on northern Gaza late last night. Fans in the UK and around the world have held vigils this weekend in memory of Liam Payne, the One Direction star who died on Wednesday. A memorial event, which included a minute's silence, took place in London's Hyde Park earlier. It comes as Liam's father visited the hotel in Argentina yesterday, where his son died, while his bandmate Zayn Malik announced he'll reschedule his US tour after the heartbreaking death. King Charles and Queen Camilla joined a church congregation in Sydney for a Sunday service on the first day of engagement during their tour of Australia. It's the King's first visit to Australia since he became monarch in September 2 years ago. On Monday, their Majesties will be in Canberra for an official reception. Their 6-day visit to the Commonwealth country will involve celebrating the nation's people, culture